that I'm not a project manager explicitly. That's not my role. I do continuous improvement stuff typically. And so normally the projects I get involved in are things that we don't necessarily know what the answer is before we start. So we try to figure out what the problem is and then do the execution of a project. That's not always the case. That's probably not what you guys will always be involved in. Sometimes you'll have something that you want to get done and you'll go and you'll execute on it. You'll already know the answer. So that's just the difference, but I do end up using those same project management skills, hopefully, in the projects that I do. So I wanted to share a couple of the high-level things that are important to me in project management. It'll also give you some places where you can go and get more information. If you're a project management professional, PMP, there's a course. It's 21 days worth of sort of learning. It's a really long thing. I think it's 40 hours or something. They spread it out over time. That's a totally different ball of wax than this. So that's kind of, I'll give you some highlights, but this is by no means intended to be a comprehensive project management course. So that's just the caveat. I will tell you a little bit about me. So this is me in the middle, my two boys and my wife on the right. I have a background, I have a degree in mathematics and a degree in industrial engineering. Don't hold the math one against me. And I spent 18 years working with Bell and all of its predecessor companies, doing mainly continuous improvement and organizational change. And so that's the type of thing that I've been involved in. And I've been in here almost 2 years. And just so you know a little bit about me normally, and I'll talk about this in one of my other slides, so you know a little bit about me outside, I spend a lot of time underwater. So I'm more than 10 days I've spent hanging out underwater. So, yeah, it's food added. So, and not commercial diving, not 10 consecutive days.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And over time I've been down there 10 days. So in terms of today's summary, what I was hoping is to give you just a technical overview of what project management is. That is fascinating. I know you'll find that it's like bullet after bullet. That's the first three, and then I'll go a little deeper into some of the things that I think are important. So that'll be problem statement, project charter, the project team, budgeting, stakeholder analysis, project risk, project planning and execution, making change stick, and some of my observations and examples if we have time. And I'll try to sort of stick those in through as we go if it's of interest to you guys. Are we in the right room? Yes, everybody here for the same thing? Great. So, just in terms of one of the things, and I thought about doing it here, we've only got an hour, so I didn't. But one of the things that I like to do with every group is a check-in and a check-out at the end. Check-in is intended to give you an opportunity to get to know the team that you're working with. I like to go around every individual, find out not only their name, but what they do, and a little bit about sort of themselves, something interesting that you don't already know. The reason for that is when I'm working with a project team, it's nice to have some type of relationship with that team. And so that's something that we don't have time to do it today, but it, from my perspective, is well worth investing 10 or 15 minutes at the beginning. And one of the things that you learn is somebody's thinking about their refrigerator at home and they're not paying attention, like it's being delivered, they're not paying attention to what's going on in the group, or something's happening at home. This is an opportunity for somebody to say, well, I'm distracted with. And then you at least know kind of what's going on. I also like to really focus on the check out at the end, because that's an opportunity for people to be candid with you about feedback in terms of how things have gone. I've built and delivered training plans. One of the things I found is they've never been the same twice, because if you're open to people telling you stuff, then you can incorporate it and make the next one better. So same thing, this is the first time I've done this one, so I'm happy to hear from you guys at the end whether it's any good. From project management, from PMI perspective, a project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. Temporary means that it's not something that's ongoing, you're not building it to go consistently. It's unique in that it's not something that you do over and over again. It's something that has to come together for a particular period of time and have a particular scope and deliverables. And so it could be just about anything, whether that's software deployment or change in the department. I'm working in the emergency department now, and we're identifying what are some of the things that we can be changing, and there's a whole raft of things that we need to be considering in terms of how to actually make those deployments happen. It needs to be managed as an entity, as something that you're actually taking some thought and figuring out how to get from point A to point B. and it requires those skills, tools, and knowledge to make it actually happen. And so this is a chance to kind of go, oh, I understand a little bit about what project management is. If you want to go down this road and become a project manager, there's lots and lots of great training out there to take it to the next level. From the project PMI perspective, and I pulled these as I put it up here so you can see that I've actually pulled it directly from their website. They have these sort of processes that they think about, consider. So there's phases in a project. There's sort of the initiation phase, there's the planning phase, execution, and then making sure you get it controlled and you close it. So very structured. Now, I said I come from a Lean Six Sigma background. We use the DMAIC process. It's the exact same thing: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. And each one has a collection of tools. And one of the things that, and I'll put this up front, if you learn some of the tools, my experience has been learning the tools is one thing, but then how you use them. Your style is going to be entirely different. And I had one of my colleagues that we used to not get along terribly well because we did things differently. And one of the things we realized, we became very close friends later on, once we realized that we had the same tool set, but we both had a different style, and that was okay. We both got results using the tools, but did it in a different way. So, take the tools for what they are, take my comments for what they are, and then make it your own. Use your own style. That's important. So PMI's knowledge areas. So these are some are more important than others. Integration. How does this project fit into your organization? The scope. How big is what you're trying to do? What's the time that there's a time component to every project that you're doing. What's the cost and how good is it going to be when it's done? The more complex projects, and I don't know what you guys get involved in specifically, but from a procurement, you need to get supplies, you need to get materials that you need. There's the human component, who's going to be on the project with you. Communications, how do you make sure you're communicating with the right people at the right time. And risk management, so the things that could be going wrong, and stakeholder management. All right? From my perspective, the most important thing that you can do for a project is to have a clear problem statement. And always, always, always listen to the customer. So that's one of the things that I like about what we're doing here at the hospital. Patients and families are involved in all of our projects in terms of driving change. I assume that the same thing would happen with yours. But it's really important to make sure that you're listening, not only just engaging them so that they can tell you what you think you want to hear, but make sure you're listening to what it is that they want. And the problem statement is really when you try to translate whatever you're hearing as your problem into what is it that we're trying to do. And so I use the example, what is the problem? And on the next page I will share the same thing, but what's the problem? The problem is that patients are in our emergency department too long. Okay? Today, patients are in the emergency department for 3 hours with a standard deviation of 109 minutes. So you can now see that on average it's this big, the variation is this much, and tomorrow we want it to be something else. And tomorrow is this day. And so in a problem statement, what's the problem, what's the current measure, what's the future measure, and what day is the future? And the reason I do this, and this is something that really helps me, is every day I can wake up in the morning and go, oh, that's what I'm trying to do today. And every activity that you're doing, if you're working on a project, is linked back to what you had originally stated you were going to do. So keep it really simple. It's really important for somebody like me to keep it simple. And this is what we did. I do this for absolutely every project. If you don't have this for a project, if you don't have a problem statement, you're probably not ready to do the project. Project charter, there's lots of samples out there. I don't know if you guys use project charters, in your day-to-day role. The intent of the charter, and we don't need, again, the details are not so important at this point, but it really does summarize the important parts of getting your thoughts together in terms of what is your project all about. What's the reason for your project? Who are the people that are going to be involved? How big is the problem? What's in scope? What's not in scope? How are you going to measure whether you've gotten what you thought you were going to get? What are the milestones? What are the things that you're expecting to deliver at particular points? What are the risks? What does your budget look like? And who's actually on the team? And then do you have approval to go forward? This is one of those things, and I will talk about it a little bit later on in terms of what each of those individual players mean to me on a project. But one of the things that I always do is I don't make this as a document that I create simply to have gotten the document done. Once I've understood the problem or the project well enough to say, I think I kind of have my head around it, I use this as my guide to make sure that I've thought of everything. And I put in here, I aim to draft one in less than 2 hours. So don't spend weeks and weeks building a project charter. It's like, do you understand it well enough to sit down and write it? Because then you have something that you can share with people. You can say, is this what we're thinking we're doing? Is this why we're doing this? Are these the right people to be involved? It really is an opportunity to use this as a communication tool. We did the same. We did one for the emergency department. As an example here, we said we want to have the 90th percentile of patients being seen under 240 minutes. So we built our problem statement that's in our reason for improvement. We gave some view as to all the things that are happening in terms of current performance, and this is just a little snapshot at the beginning. But we also say who's our executive leader, who are the key team members, who's going to be leading the project, why are we here, and what are the details associated with the project. Very simple, really can be done sort of in one sitting, and that's at least get it started. I'll talk about it now because I think it's important. There are a couple of slides a little later on, but one of the things that I found, and I'll see if it's, right here, the team. The team is probably the most important part, and I suppose if you're not requiring a team for your project, it's kind of a work assignment. It's not really a project. And part of a project is making sure you have the right people. The projects that I've been most successful with, the co-leads have ended up as friends. And so I haven't seen that in the project management handbook anywhere, but what I found is if we've got one another's back, and I understand their role well enough, and they understand mine, if somebody's sick, the project meeting carries on. It doesn't matter, we're constantly connected. So what I've said, in any project I take on, I make sure that I have a business owner, a business leader, that when that business person, they need to be a subject matter expert, they need to be the one who's in charge of that piece of the business, and they're the ones that you would expect it's going to be in their goals and objectives to have done this type of thing and get it done, say by the end of the year or the end of the month, and somebody's expecting them to do it. Otherwise, a really good project leader with you because maybe they don't care. So that's, make sure you get the right people up front, really, really important. And one of the things I've also found is I find that, a group smaller than 8 people tends to be about the right size. Then use those people to engage others. So you may have a project that ultimately engages hundreds of people, but if you don't have leadership, a core team that then can figure out how to get all those other people involved, then you're probably going to struggle. And so I try to keep my core team really small. And one of the other things I've noticed is it's one thing to have somebody assigned as a resource for your project, but if they're not interested and not engaged and you don't draw them in, you can guess how productive they're going to be on your team. They're just there in name only. So one of the things that I found is really important is to make sure that you're getting your team interested in what you're doing. Why is it? Back to the problem statement. What are we trying to solve? Is it something that people care about? And then get the team rallied around that. Once you have your team, stakeholder map, so who are the people that you're going to be interacting with? Are you going to be influencing? Are you going to be trying to change? This is not something that I've done every time formally, and it's something you'll see here. It says this document should not be shared inside the working team. I think 3 times that I can think of in my entire career have I had one of these that I thought, I really probably shouldn't share this. And part of the reason is this is about understanding as well some of those folks that may be either resistant or be completely negative towards what you're doing. And this is about how do we want to tackle this in a way that we can get the results that we're looking for and involve all the people that need to be involved. And so sometimes that could be seen as being, I don't know, maybe something that people wouldn't be comfortable with. So we want to just, but if you've got your core team, you've got your 1 or 2, 3 people that are leading this, sometimes you really do have to have a strategy for how you're going to deal with certain people. This is your opportunity. And it's something that you really need to do, you might want to just throw it out when you're done. That's the sort of thing that, like, how are we going to handle this? And be rid of it. It's not intended to be something that you keep for the posterity of the project. So that's just a quick summary there. This is my preferred way of doing projects, is sort of an iterative design. I don't love having a project that you start at the beginning and here's all the steps that are going to get you to the end, and you've got to have thought through all the potential problems that you could run into all the way down. So what I like is a project where you go with your objective and you can prototype and you say, oh, let's trial this in a smaller area. So let's trial this on a Thursday afternoon. Let's trial this in this particular clinic. Let's trial this in this corner of the emergency department. We trialed so many different pod and team ways of working. Melanie's seen this with us all every day. We're talking about, how could we do this differently, and giving people the freedom to do things differently. And then, like magic, on a holiday, the entire department changes, and it's now, we've changed how we're using one of the rooms as a waiting space. We've been probably 28 days that it's been in place, and it's stuck because it was something that people found that worked for them. And so that's evolving. So that's how I like to do a project. There are two sort of distinct ways you can do it. One, you can have a project that has very clear steps that have to be accomplished. That's one type of project. I like these better. I like the ones where we don't know what the answer is, we try something, it does work, you take the things that work, you throw away the things that don't, and you try the next thing. And so, but those are two very different styles of projects. Excuse me. A couple of things. One of the things that I always struggle with a little bit when I'm thinking about a project is, how do I make sure that I'm doing the right things? And how do I get all the steps? And so I have found a technique that I like, and again, you can use your own. The one technique I would suggest you not use is sitting down by yourself in a corner and start writing. That's probably not going to get everything. It might be a start. I often like to have jotted my thoughts down, but then how do you engage other people? One of the ways I like to do it is with this cause and effect diagram, fishbone diagram, Ishikawa diagram. You hear about all kinds of different names. The way I use them is I take people, process, policy, and place, and put one of those on each of the little feeders, and that gives people a way to start thinking about what are the things that we need to think about. What are the people things that we need to do for this project? What are the process things? How do we make this flow? What are the place, like physically, how do we structure things so that they're in the right place to get the right things done at the right time, so that they're within reach of people? How do we get those things done? And then policy, are there things that we organizationally are either mandated to do or we have to consider, or maybe we've had a policy in place but maybe the policy doesn't apply anymore, maybe we need to change policy. So all of those sorts of things are the things that you can use as triggers for thinking about how do you build a list of all the things that you might need to do in your project. Next thing, if you take this group, and this always blows my mind, and if you haven't seen it done, it's worth seeing. If everybody takes 3 stickies for each of these different categories and writes down their idea, the top 3 things that they think are most important for each one. If you want to put 10 or 50, that's fine, but at least try to get 3. And then one person starts reading them out, and everybody that's in the room says, oh, I said that, and you can put them together. So you take the 2 ideas that are the same, you put them together. So everybody's getting their stickies, and then you start building this affinity diagram. And it's remarkable how a team like this can keep track of all the different things that people have said to that point. I remember so-and-so said this just a few minutes ago. It's that one, it's over there on that side of the board. And so as a team, you can very quickly put all the different ideas up on the board. You stack them together in ways where you can, here's the people things, here's the process things, here's the place things. And then as they get double and triple, and then you write down how many there were of that particular, same idea. And then you can actually, if you want, you can even vote on them. And so one of the things I use is a multi-voting system where you give people, you can do it I normally give people 6 dots, and I say, in your mind, you can put 3 dots on the thing you think is most important, 2 on the thing you think is second most important, and 1 dot on the thing you think is third most important. And everybody goes up and, depending on people's honesty, of course, they go up and they put the dots on, and all of a sudden you see the prioritized list of things that you need to do appear before you. And so that way you're also using the intelligence of all the people. You can then turn that around really quickly and put it in the hands of whoever needs to see it, and you can, add more detail through over time. Seem like a reasonable way to get lots of ideas, then you can turn those into your action register. So you take all the summarized ideas and you can say, here's all the things that you want to get done. Okay, and then you can put those. The action register is, what's the theme? Are there updates? who's the individual who's responsible for it, and what date are you planning to have that done. And then how you organize that, you can shuffle them all around and say which ones are most important. You can put them in chronological order and off to the races. So that's a really easy way to keep things moving. Excuse me. I'm just trying to keep track of the time. We're roughly halfway. So milestones. I would always suggest that even once you've got your list, make sure that you highlight what are the milestones that you want. Not only your end date, but what are the couple of things that you think are important to get you from one place to the other. Sometimes you have a date that's like, this is the date, this is what it is, this is why it is, we have a, we're deploying, something's changing and it's got to be done by this date. That's one kind of date. I would also suggest that if you don't have one of those hard deadlines, set one anyway. Because it's amazing how you can rally around an artificial deadline. Sometimes people don't, they just, yeah, sure, we'll get that done for whatever day. And we kind of picked it arbitrarily, but it gives people something to sort of aim for and a target. So that's really why I think that's been important. Any project where I haven't set a deadline, I've been my own worst enemy because things start to slide. And so if I set a date, you aim for it, you have people to talk to, aim for it, and it really helps you move things through more efficiently. I considered, the Gantt charting and all that stuff. You guys have probably seen and heard of those. This is as deep a Gantt chart as I think we're going to talk about today. The idea is this gives you a sense of what are the actions that you're trying to get done, what order are they going to come in, and if you want, you can actually connect them to say, in order to do this piece, you've got to have done these two, and this one can be done independently, so you don't have any arrows on it. Really straightforward, but this is effectively what's happening when you're managing your project. You've got a bunch of tasks, each one of them is going to take you some period of time, and somewhere along the way you're going to hit 1, 2, 3 milestones, and you're going to get to the end of your project. So that's effectively what you're doing with project planning. You can take an action register and make it as complicated as you want. This is something I pulled from the web, Excel file with color coded, and you can do that if you want. This is mine. I use this on almost every project I have, and I structure it saying what's the theme that we're trying to get accomplished, what's the most recent update, and I normally will say an update from whoever and on the date, and then I'll add that on underneath. And if things are no longer used, then I take them off. So I keep my action register kind of dynamic and use it as a way of saying, oh, we're doing this, we're doing that. And it can also be, you can take sections of this and you can send it to people. So for me, that's really effective. You choose what you think is most important to you, but then the dates are also really important because then you start noticing if things are starting to slide. And you can then, if you want, you can go back and look at your previous ones and you can see where were you at each different interval. And I do at the top, sort of just keep track of which date that particular version is from. Excuse me. So, project risk. I thought this cartoon was kind of appropriate. Your project, often there are risks, whatever those are, financial, safety, whatever, there's risks. You can avoid it, you can simply walk away, or you can find a new way to go that isn't going to be so risky. You can put a strategy in to mitigate the risk, so you can do something to prevent the risk. You can get insurance, so sometimes you can have somebody else take responsibility for some of the risk, or you can just accept it and hope that there's water down below and dive over. So leave that to you to decide how you want to do it. From a budget perspective, and I didn't want to go too deep into budgeting, but there's a bunch of things that you have to think about. You have to think about the phases of your project. You have to think about the people costs. You have to think about the materials costs, anything that you're going to be ordering, and then you have to figure out, based on what you planned, then what was your actual, and did you deviate from that? And so you can make these as complicated as you want. I know that, I think from a research perspective, you guys probably have, in many cases, have a particular pot of money and you have to figure out how to allocate that properly. You need to figure out what is it you're going to spend money on, and then did you have it cost what you thought it was going to be. Not just in these times, but always, it's important to make sure you use caution in terms of how the business realities are playing out and who's involved. So typically I'm tremendously optimistic, but I've seen a number of scenarios where if you have the wrong people involved, sometimes things get ordered that don't belong in your project. It just, oh, this project's open, we'll just bill it to that. Sometimes if you have, you know, one or two more people, you can have things, you know, a little bit of collusion happening and things get misused. Just be really careful that you make sure you understand where the money's being spent, how it's being spent, because you don't want to get to the end of the thing and say, oh, that wasn't what I expected. And we see this all the time. As recently as this week, you know, I saw one example, we thought, oh, that was a little shady. So just be aware. Make sure you take stock of how your money's being spent and who has access. Standard work. This can be really helpful when it comes time to actually put something in place that you want to stay that way. So we've been doing a lot of trial and error in the emergency department right now, and we're testing things. But one of the things that's come up is there's this one particular setup, the room B waiting area, where we've said, yeah, it's kind of stable and it's there, but everybody's using it a little differently. So we're at the point where we're now going to have to start collecting what are all the best practices that are happening associated with that room, and then writing down, this is what the expectation is. And that can be of the physicians, of the nurses, of whoever, but you need to make sure that we're writing down, this is our standard way of dealing with whatever you're trying to talk about. And this really makes it so that you do consistently. So one of the things that we're also looking at in the emergency department, and I use that because it's my most current area that I'm working, there are 18 key presentations that come into the department that make up 50% of all the time spent in the department. And so one of the things that we've been talking about is how do we make sure that we handle those consistently? You know, you obviously always have to be aware that something could be not as it seems, but for the most part, fever, cough, vomiting, diarrhea, like it's the same ones that we're seeing day after day after day. How do we handle those? What education gets done, by who, when, all those things, what are the different steps that are required in order to get you from point A to point B? And so we're trying to standardize as much as we can, at least those top 18, so that we can spend our time focusing on those onesies and twosies. We have 1,000 different diagnoses every year in the department, more than 1,000, but 18 of them make up 50% all the time. So standardize the ones that we can handle in a routine way. Communication throughout a project. And I just put down some of the ways that I particularly like. Face-to-face, that depends on your environment. One of the things that's really nice about this location is almost everything that happens, and I don't know if this is the case for you guys, but almost everything that happens can be done face-to-face. Can be done with team meetings. There's a whole group of areas here that are doing huddles on either a daily or a weekly basis. And those huddles can be used for continuous improvement, for project updates. Sometimes it's best to do them standing, where you come together, spend 15 minutes. It's not terribly comfortable for people to sit down and settle in for an hour and a half, and you can get a lot done. There's teams that I work with here that have 10 or 12 people that all come together all at once, and they can bring up a problem and they can have it solved. So 2 physicians one day they had a problem with something that was happening in the flow of their clinic, and one of the booking clerks said, "Oh, that's because this is what's in the letter." And nobody knew. Oh, let's change the letter. And coming out of a 15-minute session, they were able to change the letter they were sending to the patients, because it was just everybody's around to talk to one another. So really important to talk to each other. You can do blogs, you can do video, you can do email, newsletters, whatever. Steering committees and informal updates. So opportunities to just talk to people when it's appropriate. If you know your problem statement, you know all the activities you're doing, then you're going to be really able, in a position to talk to people about what do you want to do, what do you need help with, what do you need them for, and they can help you with it. The other thing I find is the emailing and the weekly updates, that sort of thing, is not something I do terribly well. And so what I found is, if you can find somebody who does do it well, that's a great person to help you. And so we have somebody in the emergency department who does a fantastic job of summarizing what we've done that week and sending it out. So great, take advantage of the skills of other people, and you don't have to do it all yourself. And so that some people do an exceptional job, and they're the ones that you want to engage. And you can just be thankful that the entire presentation wasn't this, because this is what I do every day. This is the piece that really gets me excited, but there is a component of quality in project management. And so There is, decades of quality improvement. There's all kinds of TQM. There's the total quality management. There's Lean. There's Six Sigma. There's all sorts of quality processes that have come along. They have all kinds of tools. Maybe there's 300 quality tools that you can use. Many of those are applicable to project management, and so again, if you learn the tools, then apply them. And one of the things I like to tell people is there isn't really a right way. Like, there's not a way that you have to do it. Find the tools that work for you and use those, and use them well, and that will help move you in the right direction. Obviously, lots of people that have thought about quality in the past, and as I said, my focus is typically the Lean and the Six Sigma. I really like it. The Lean is very practical. It's about engaging people and making sure that you're using, the 8 types of waste, and you're targeting waste and you're removing waste from the process. It's very hands-on. It's really practical. The Six Sigma, kind of some people suggested that if you have a propeller on your head, it's a little more suited for those folks because it's stats-based and it's a little bit more analytical. But I find the two combined together could be really helpful. So I will only inflict one slide of that on you. One of the things that I was part of a grant proposal conversation at one point, and one of the things that I heard a few times was, well, we're going to do something just to educate people. And so one of the things that I did want to highlight, and from a project management perspective always makes me a little nervous, is if you say we're just going to do education and that's going to change behavior, very often that is not the case. You kind of have to make the process so that the right things happen. And so you could tell somebody that this is how you have to plug, if you had a single prong on a plug and you just plug it in, you could say, just plug it in this way. Well, people will find a way to mess it up. And so sometimes you have to build the process so that you can only put the circle where there's one pin and the rectangle where there's 2. You can only plug in a plug one way. So one of the things that I like to encourage when you're thinking about managing a project is don't just try to tell people how to do something differently. Help make it so that that's the only way you could do it. As an example, if somebody wants to have a process that you have to do, maybe in an OR, maybe you tear off the compartments as you move through each phase, or it's those types of things that help mistake proof. You guys do it all the time with medicine prescriptions. If you've torn off the Monday, you've probably taken that pill, right? So it's don't just tell somebody that you got to take your medication, this stuff on Monday and this stuff on Tuesday. Make it so that that's the easy way to do it, and that you're less likely to make mistakes. Maintaining control of projects, and I was tempted to really go stats heavy since you guys are in research, and I'm certain that everybody has a really strong stats background, but one of the things I like to think about in any project that I'm working on is I think about it sort of from a control charts perspective, and you think about what is it that's the natural behavior over time, and then you're going to do something, and then in theory something's going to change, and you can do the stats to say, do I need to use a t-test or pair t, and I can compare before and after. Really all I'm suggesting is what you want to make sure is that you've got in your mind, how are you going to measure whether your process is any better? And typically the way I do projects and change is I like to have whatever measure that we're looking at beforehand, and then I like to be able to draw on the chart, say, here's when we put something new in place, and then did we see some new change? And if I can't, statistically prove that there's a change, then I probably shouldn't claim that there is. So just because something happened to go up in the month after I finished doing something, that doesn't necessarily mean that I've made a positive change. So I like to think about trying to drive my processes out of control in a positive way. And those of you who remember stats and your Western Electric rules, anybody familiar with Western Electric rules? No. Anyway, it's a way of looking. So go deeper. It's really helpful. But I won't bother I'm not going to take you there, but it's basically to tell you if your process has improved or your change has been effective. Know when to quit. And I don't know how applicable this is to your role. I have been in projects. One of my first projects was probably one of my most spectacular and best failures ever. I had been asked organizationally, please go do this. And I diligently said, yes, I will go do that because that's what I've been asked to do. And I spent months and months fighting to try to get what I had been asked to do done. And one of the things when we finally pulled the towel or threw in the towel, realized that months before I should have stopped. There wasn't an organizational will to be doing what we were trying to do. And so one of the things that we actually wrote was a paper on how to close a project and when to close a project. And we basically built a 3 strikes rule that says, here's where we are, here's the challenges that we're up against, this is what we need. And we do that twice, and the third time that happened, we shut the project down. Because I was being measured on the benefits that I was driving into the organization, you could only have one failure, right? We couldn't go failure after failure because you weren't going to get the results you needed. And so that was a fantastic, learning experience for me. Style, I mentioned this earlier, but whatever project management tools that you happen to use, whatever they are, whether it's the stakeholder analysis, the charter, whatever, once you've learned the tools, then apply them in a way that's comfortable for you. Okay? Some people are, attention to detail and love filling in all the bits and pieces, and that's their thing, and they can make that work for them. Oh, sorry?
Sorry, my phone just erupted.
Yelling at it. So if that's how you like to work, then great, make that work for you. If you like to be a little bit more, cowboy-esque, and you can still find a way to use the tools and get you to the same sort of results, then, as I say here, as long as the patient safety isn't compromised, then you can probably do things a little bit differently than you would normally do them otherwise. So again, find the style that works for you, learn the tools, and make it your own. Because what I found is people's personality is really important in making projects successful. If people want to be engaged and are interested in what you're doing, then they're going to want to come along and join you and help you be successful. If they don't care for working with you, your projects are going to struggle. Right? And so there is a personality piece. So find a fit that works for you, and not everybody's going to be the same, and that's okay. I just wanted to share some of my favorite mentoring insights, and I think that I'll share it with you and take from it what you like. One of my favorites is you don't have to be the smart guy. So you learn some of these tools, and then I come into almost every workshop I go into not knowing the answer. Because if I know the answer, why did I have the workshop? And so if you structure using some of these tools and you're engaging people and you're listening and you're sort of working through the process will take you to the right place. So you don't have to come in trying to know everything. What I find is that when somebody comes into a workshop and they are trying to be the smart guy, it smells manipulative. I don't know if you've ever experienced that. When somebody has an agenda, they already know what they want. That's not the same fella says to me, he says, if I had to do over, he happened to be an industrial engineer, and he said if I was doing it over again, I'd do a PhD in psychology, because it's so people focused. This is the easy part's the technical. You learn the tools, check, easy, no problem. But then how does this relate to the person? That's really can be really challenging. One of the things I always take the ethical path. Even if it might be able to save the hospital a couple of dollars by, using those licenses that just haven't been taken off the computer. Well, those licenses belong to somebody else. So, that always take the path of highest ethics if you can. One of the things I liked is, sort of empowering team members and making sure that they're getting an education and learning and growing. And the spirit was, I want to be proud of you where you go next. Don't worry about holding on to people and holding them back. I want you to go and take these tools and use them somewhere else and do them even better than you did them here. Be transparent and treat people like adults. People are adults. They can accept hard truth. And I've watched this particular fellow, is a good friend of mine, I've watched him in a room tell people that had not heard the truth in years. The real hard truth about what's happening, and this was back in my telecom days, and it was loyalty retention. So, we're down by X millions of dollars, and I need your help, and this is what we need to do, and we need to do it together. People can accept that, and that's, I think, is important from my perspective. And then the other one, sometimes you need to map out the process and figure what's the flow, how do things work in whatever area whatever you're trying to accomplish. And I did like this one because I use it not only in as-is mapping, but he says, formal as-is mapping is stupid and it gives you the illusion of progress. And so one of the things I often try to check myself is if I get carried away with the details, just make sure that those details are actually going to take me somewhere, and they're not just me filling it in just to keep me amused. And so that was one that I thought was particularly helpful. System implementations. I don't know how much you guys would actually be doing system implementations. One of the things I have found is that the systems, and this is just my own bias because I look at it from a continuous improvement lens, is that I find that the system implementations are often not going to give you as big a bang for the buck as you think, and sometimes just by doing sort of some manual ways of changing the process, changing how you work, my experience has been that I've been able to harvest much of the benefit of a new system implementation a year before they can. And it makes me really popular with the project managers that are responsible for deploying that system and harvesting those benefits, because then they don't get them in the way that they thought. So just something to be aware of. The system is rarely the solution. I think I heard it when I walked into the emergency department. Well, we don't have an EDIS. And guess what? If it's important enough to be an EDIS, then it's probably important enough to do it by pen and paper. And we should be keeping track and doing some of the things manually, and you can get at some of the same things that you would have with the system. So just be cautious. I have yet to buy a system as a project. One of the things I also like to do, and this is one of my my own little tricks that I think is helpful, use the technology to support moving you forward. Anybody here use dictations on their phone? It blows people's minds how quickly I can turn stuff around, and I'll take pages and pages of information. And I'll say, oh, I'll do that for the morning. And people are like, you what? You just talk to the phone as fast as you can talk. It'll put it all in, and then you can turn it back to the team. Done. And so those are the types of things that I find really helpful, and it also means that if you're going to do where I showed you the sticky exercise, and you're going to take a group through collecting all sorts of information, reams and reams of information, well, you can very quickly get that in and organized just by using your phone. And you talk to it, and then you can shuffle it all around, and you can send it back to people for comments, and it can be reasonably painless, and it also collects all of the information that everybody has shared, and so everybody feels like, what, we have captured it, it's not lost on a piece of paper somewhere, it's available for us when we need it, and you can go back and reference it. So it's some of those little things that I find really helpful, and they can kind of make you more successful without spending infinite amounts of time. Recognition goes a really long way. So saying thank you. Saying thank you publicly is great. A couple of times I've had people that have come back to me and said, remember when you said thank you to me like 6 years ago? I'm thinking, no. But you guys all remember from times of your own, I'm sure, where somebody actually said a heartfelt thank you, whether it be privately or in public. It goes a really long way. So some people are really, really good at this, but it does help certainly with getting people engaged in your project and willing to come back and work with you again. If it's something you're appreciating them for the work that they're doing with you, that will go a really long way. And I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I do have, sort of in my own mind, I keep track of some of the projects that I've done. It's been everything from manufacturing to non-payment to loyalty. And each one of them, to me, has a benefit. So I look at this and I think, signatures. We used to require signatures on all modems that were sent out to customers. The signature cost us $1.50, and we were doing it, 100,000 times a year. And when we started, the modems might have been $200 a piece, and we lost 3 or 4 a year. And when we stopped, the modems were $20 a piece, and we were still collecting signatures on these modems that, who cares? Like, if we lose 4 a year, oh well. So some of these projects, I've got in my mind, what was the success there? And so as you're doing projects, you'll be able to remember each of the successes as you go through, and each one will stand out as having its own things that you've learned. And the only thing that I can suggest from a project, and I don't know if you guys all do projects, but one thing that I can suggest is, until you've actually done it, you're not going to get good at it. You have to do it and do it and do it, and the best thing to do it is do it with somebody who is experienced. And when you do it, don't wait for somebody to tell you that you can. Just kind of take the initiative and go. And you guys maybe already do that, but I know when I was looking at organizational change early in my career, I waited for somebody to give me permission to come and make a change, and things just continue to evolve, and you never get any change done. And so what I found is if we take the action and just go take it by the horns and say, we're going to change this, and we don't ask, people don't come back and yell at you for changing things in a positive way. Couple of things in terms of where you can go for more information. I pulled the first few slides from the PMI, PMBOK guide. There is a whole course structure. You can spend money, you can get certified. There is a project management curriculum, and you can follow that, and there's lots and lots of information. It's all of these things that I've talked about in far more detail. I personally like the i6sigma.com. It's got definitions, dictionary definitions. It's more quality focused, but there's all kinds of information in there that's also important, that can be important to you. So those are some of the places that I would go from a resource perspective. I know it was a whole lot of stuff and not a lot of time, but I did want to leave a few minutes at the end to sort of see if you guys had questions, thoughts, comments. Start with questions.
What was that other, you mentioned something besides I6 Sigma.
The PMI, and they call it the Project Management Body of Knowledge Guide, PMBOK.
Lean. Do I remember something? Oh,
Lean. Lean, yes. So I do Lean and Six Sigma, typically, and now we don't do, organizationally as the IWK, we don't do Six Sigma. Don't tell anybody, but occasionally I still use some of those tools. But yeah, so those are, and that's a DMA process is the Lean Six Sigma methodology. Others?
I just have a comment. I do find in healthcare there's a resistance to implementing something without like 5 million, 100 meetings, and you know, you come up with an idea and it's just like, let's just do it. If it fails, so what? There's no risk involved. We just try it. And I do find that a really hard thing to overcome in a lot of my working groups, because it's like, well, did we go through this? Could we go through this? Did everyone and their dog review it? It's just like, just do it. If it doesn't work, get rid of it, modify it, whatever. Tips for overcoming that resistance to...
Building trust has been one. I would say one of the things that I found here that's really interesting is one of my, and this is something I always try to do, is find small wins early on, as early as you can. I was in one clinic where when I first got here, we ended up with a $4 aerator that was required. And the reason that they needed an aerator was because without the aerator, every time they turned the water on, it would splash all over them. And then before going to see a patient, you'd be trying to get it dried off. It was a real irritant, but it was $4. Yeah. It just hadn't been done. So I would say start with, get some of the small wins, and then trust. One of the things that we've said in the emergency department is at any point, someone can say stop. You know, if there's a patient safety issue that somebody sees, of course, everybody's a professional. They all know what's safe and what's not. If it's not something that's going to impact safety, like is somebody sitting here or there, then try it. And if you don't like it, change it back. So that's where I, like, I think, and that's sort of the, and Mel, you can speak to the culture that's coming in the emergency department. It's really, there's a change,
there's been a big change in the culture. I've seen from the, this is the way it's always been done, to the, let's try and see and share our thoughts on it, so.
Yeah. So giving people feedback, one of the things I have found is really helpful, and I think it's probably exactly where you're saying is, what the focus is for us in the emergency department is what are we going to do to ourselves than what's going to be done to us. And so we are in it together, we know what our objective is, and we're all working to get there. And we're not going to have somebody come and tell us this is how you're going to work. We're saying, how do we want to work to meet that objective? And it's been really different. It takes time, and things don't always go well. And some people are tremendously resistant. But if you find that you get a handful of people that are really on board, and then something starts working, this room B waiting area, nobody told them that they had to put a waiting B waiting area in, and it has stuck. It's still there 28 days later.
Can I ask what it is, if it was such a, what is the waiting room?
So all we did is we took one of the, what would have been a patient care room and turned it into a family waiting area directly beside two others. And so instead of having a patient sit in a room and stay in those two rooms, if they're mobile, they move back to the waiting room. So the nurse will see them and put them back. The physician will come see somebody and put them back. And so as long as they can move, they're in the process of being cared for, but they're not going back to the main waiting area. They're staying in a waiting area right beside a room where they can be seen.
Oh,
And so you can, we've sacrificed one room, but we've meant that 6 families can use 2, right? So it's effectively given us a whole bunch of extra rooms, and it's been really, really well received. And it's the team, I didn't say go put that room in there. The team figured out for themselves that this is going to work better for us and maintain safety. And then it's evolved. Oh, how do we know it's been cleaned? Well, we're going to put a clean, dirty tag on it. Oh, how's it going to, do we know if it's occupied? Well, we'll put it, so the team has taken it and run with it. And really, it's all about how do we want to work better together. So I would say start small with little positive things that are good and important, and build some of that trust, and then get people to work, to the maximum scope of their practice, and give people the freedom. I mean, empower people to change it. That's really what they're doing. The team's doing it themselves.
Do you have any, I know that there's no easy answer, I'm sure, to this, but one of the things I noticed, well, there's 2 comments I want to make. One is maintaining momentum, because when you're doing things from the side of your desk, and you don't have dedicated core cluster that could manage the project and doing this, are there some specific strategies that can
I
help?
have one. And my strategy is make it fun for them. If you need people engaged and you want them to make this side of the desk thing so that yours gets more attention, it does potentially pull from somebody else. But if your project is interesting and it's engaging and it's valuable and they see where it's going to go, that's probably one of them. You can assign somebody as a resource to this person has 30%, but if somebody is really interested, they'll give more than 30%, right? And so that my strategy is always to make sure that it's something that people are enjoying and worthwhile.
And I think my other piece is related to maintaining change. So we in the health center tend to be really good about creating change, but not really good at implementation, monitoring, and.
So you saw my control chart there?
Yeah.
So the way my typical project trajectory is, we spend a lot of time figuring out what it is we want to do, and then there comes a point where you're going to do it, and then you're going to see the improvement in terms of you've reduced something, but you're going to see the benefit is going to start to rise. Typically, the project, 3 months to get to the point where you get to sort of your peak benefits, and then our rule was always you had to maintain those benefits for a year. And if I built the process in such a way, or done the project in such a way that it's stable, then I don't have to do any more work during that year. I just harvest the benefits. If the benefits start to dip, then I have to come back in. And so it's in my best interest to set it up so it can be successful in the long
So
term.
that's the standardization we're talking about,
Yeah.
standard for each.
Yeah. Standardization and measures.
Energy
Like,
in the back end.
yeah, what's the right measure? And who's got to act on it? If I asked you right now, how many patients are in the emergency room right now?
Like from this morning? Or
Right now. Yeah, right now. Like, how many people have been seen so far today, as an example?
Oh,
That data actually exists. Found it this morning.
yeah.
So those are the types of things. Like, what do you need to give people? Put them in the hands of the leaders so that they can take action with those. So a lot of it is about getting the right stuff. Some of it just is evolved there. Like most of I never like to think that we've gotten to a place that needs improvement because of something that somebody did maliciously. We've been here for. Hospital's been around forever. And telecom's been around for 120 years, and it's been an evolution to get you there. And each piece was put in smartly, but now sometimes you have to go back and reflect on changing the whole process or doing a project.
So do you sort of do any in-house sort of consulting, so if people wanted you to come and sort of review what they've done so far and, maybe identify weaknesses, do you do that?
Happily.
Only because I'm his friend.
Only one of you in the room will get any special treatment.
She works with
Perfect, you're good. No, my point about doing projects and having somebody who's done it before, that mentorship, I couldn't have been successful. I would suggest that the first few years of my career were not nearly as successful as the later years in my career after I had good mentorship and somebody that knew how to do the different tools, but then also knew how to help people do them for themselves. So I would hate to think that somebody wanted to do something and didn't have somebody that would support them. So if it wasn't me, I mean, we've got a few people in-house that are really good at that kind of stuff, but I'm always willing to come in and at least have a conversation.
Cool.
Yeah, kind of, it's always fun. And to be honest, almost all of my projects, even now that I'm here, have come from other work. So as you're involved in things, you learn about other pieces, and then those become projects. And so it's very often an organic change. So it would be crazy to say no to you.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much. This was
pleasure.
great. And how can people best get in touch with you or someone that you can direct them to?
I would say email is probably the best
Okay.
bet. I am in-house, so Jeff Harvey. And just maybe, I know we're 2 minutes over, but I would ask, if you do have feedback, I'm happy to hear it. So how is this for you guys? Does this match with kind of what you were thinking? Would you have rather had fewer things deeper, or was 50,000 feet at 100 miles an hour?
I think you should do a few more sessions deeper on things.
Yeah.
This was good for
Yeah.
nobody, don't get me right,
Yeah.
but I think we could all benefit.
So I'm happy to do those sorts of things. I know that the request was a 1 hour project management, so that's, but I agree, like when you're going through this,
It's too
the
much.
project management is a deep thing to dive into. If you need those sorts of things, I would absolutely suggest go deeper.
Yeah.
So for what you hopefully needed, this will give you a flavor, but yeah, I think that's important, and if you guys want that.
Because you could probably spend an hour on each sort of
Oh,
segment that
yeah.
you-
Or a day.
Yeah, and you can choose which ones are most important, like it's
Yeah.
problem statements and project charters alone. Is it worth going in, try it, talk about what does it mean, who do you need involved, why do you need them, all those sorts of things. Like every one of them has hours worth of conversation you could continue.
Yeah, I think this was great as our introduction to now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think one of the things you'd have to do is make sure you understood what it is that you're going to use it for.
Yeah.
Because that, for me, like at a high level, it's easy to do, but then how would you guys use it in specific examples? That will take more time to make sure that we flush it, but happy to do those sorts of things if it's helpful. It's not my day job, but it would be off the side of my desk, and if it was interesting, I'd probably be willing to do it.
Thank you so
Cool.
much.
I'm sure you'll be doing that. Or you did it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, see, I could go for that.